Hello and welcome to part 2 of our video series on building a TypeScript and Postgres API. Today we're going to be taking a look at setting up our jest configuration files, which are going to provide configuration for our test runners to support our unit tests. If you do want to follow along, there is a link in the video description to the repo that we're using, and if you want to check out part 2, the branch part 2, then you'll be able to see exactly what I see as we're going through everything. So first things first, we're going to take a look at configuring jest, which is the test runner that we're going to be using. And what we're going to want to do is provide it with a set of instructions to use whenever we execute our test commands. And to do that, we are actually going to make use of a new file in the root of our project called jest.config.ts. Now, I already have a jest config file that I've used in numerous projects, and what you'll find is over the course of your career as a software engineer, you'll have numerous config files that you'll work with over the years, and you'll find that a lot of the config can be used across multiple projects. This one here, it's fairly simple. We import the type definitions for a config object from the jest library. And what we do is export a function that will return the configuration object for us. I have a few things in here. Verbose, that essentially says when we run the test command, we want as much information coming out of the test commands as we can. The preset is essentially a way of telling jest what preset we should be using for these particular test files. In our case, we want to use a library called jest, which allows you to run jest against TypeScript files, as originally it was developed to run just purely against JavaScript files. We also have a transformer on here, which this looks a little bit funny, but it's a glob matching pattern essentially that says we're looking for any file that has a .ts or .tsx. TS is one that we're really interested in, but if you ever do any front-end development in the future, React and Next.js, those types of front-end frameworks tend to make use of TSX files. And all this does is it says if we encounter a TS or a TSX file, run the tsjest command, which will allow jest to transpile our code on the fly and use the resulting JavaScript files for tests. Next up, we've got this reset mocks. We're not going to cover off mocks too much in this video. We'll save it for a later video, but mocks are essentially a way of stubbing out external dependencies so that you don't need to write tests that specifically test how that library works, and it allows you to focus just purely on your code and making sure that it works okay. Now, this is what I would call like a base configuration object. This config will be used for all of our tests, and we are going to be, for this particular project, implementing two types of tests. Unit tests, which there's going to be a vast number of unit tests as they are the simplest tests to write, and then integration tests, which are more complex, and by their nature there are fewer of them because they are more complicated to write. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a test file or test configuration file that will be used when we execute our unit tests specifically. So to do that, we're just going to do write a new file, jest.unit.config.ts. And similarly to the base config, I've already got one that I've used numerous times, and we're just going to paste that one in here, and we'll take a look. Similar, it's got the config type imported. We also import the base configuration object from our jest.config.ts file. And then what we do is we make use of this spread operator to use the base configuration and then extend it with these additional commands in here. So the first one being a test matcher. This is used to determine which files within your project should be executed as part of these tests. So for this one, it's another glob matching pattern. So it's going to look for anything that's got a file name dot and then unit.test.ts at the end. So it will mean that any files that we write that have a .unit.test.ts extension will be executed as part of this command. Next up, we have this coverage threshold. It's a controversial or subjective topic, coverage. Personally, I aim for 100% test coverage, which means that every line of code, every branching statement, every conditional, every function is tested 100%. It's seen as difficult to do in some circumstances, but actually what you'll find through working through this project is you'll see that it's not actually too difficult to gain 100% test coverage. And what it means is with it, you can, assuming you're writing good tests, you'll be able to say that your code is rock solid and that you can have confidence in it, which is really beneficial nowadays. Next up, we've got a command that says we should be collecting our code coverage and making sure that the coverage thresholds are met. And then we've got collect coverage from, and this is, so there's two things in here. This one here says everything within the source directory with the TS extension should be included. And this one says everything within the source directory that is tagged up as an integration test should be ignored. So this means that we're not going to be trying to collect test coverage from an integration test file, which we won't be providing coverage for because it's not necessarily. And then lastly, we've got clear mocks. So essentially we'll wipe out any mocks that we create as part of our unit tests. So we'll save that one there. Next up, you may have noticed that we actually have this jest command here that we actually need to add the package for. So we're just going to do npm i jest -d, and that will add the jest file package for us. And then what we'll do is we'll just write a simple script in here for actually running our unit tests. So we'll just add one in here, unit tests, and that will do jest -c jest.unit.config.ts. So when we run the command npm run unit test, it'll execute this jest command with a config specifically for our unit test configuration file. And what we'll do is we'll just write a quick test just to confirm that jest is up and running. So we'll just add a source directory and we'll just add a index.unit.test.ts. And within here, what we'll do is we'll write a describe block, which is essentially a group of tests. And we'll just call this our first test. And then we will write an actual test, and that will confirm expects 1 to equal 1. It's a really trivial test, but it will allow us just to make sure that our tests are actually running. So what we'll do is we'll just do expect 1 dot to equal 1. What you'll notice and what you'll find over time is that jest tends to be very explicit in the way that it describes its tests. So this is fairly easy to read left to right, so it makes it easy to follow along with your tests. So for this particular test, it should pass because 1 should equal 1. So we'll just run our tests and see what happens there. npm run unit test. Oh, we haven't added ts node, which is useful. Jest ts node is required. So let's add that package as well. Okay, so we've added ts node as a dev dependency there as well. Let's try that again. And there we go. So we've got a test that passes here, expect 1 to equal 1. Now what I'll do is I'll also show you what happens if you write a test that doesn't work. So we'll just write this one, 2 to equal 2, and we'll write it wrong on purpose because obviously 2 doesn't equal 1. So we'll take a look and see what that actually looks like when we run it. And what you'll notice is we've now got one test suite, and the test suite is essentially a file. And then we've got one test within it is passing, and one test is failing. And you can see expect 1 equals 1 is passed, but this one has failed because it was expecting it to be a 1, but it received a 2. So we can just swap that out, rerun our tests, and we've got a passing suite of tests now. And what you'll find as we start to increase the number of tests and the number of files, this area of the terminal here will fill up with different files that have been successfully covered off. But for the moment, we don't actually have any TypeScript files that we're running proper tests against. But that's it for this video. We've installed Jest, got the TypeScript setup needed for TS-Jest and TS-Node, and we've set up our unit test configuration so that it grabs and uses the right coverage thresholds. In the next video, what we'll do is we'll start to get our Express server set up so that we are able to create an Express server that's listening for HTTP requests. So I'll see you in the next video.